Hello, everyone, and welcome to our conversation today. Our topic is the power of advocacy through public speaking. And our guest today is Rebecca Bultsma, a practical AI strategist who's helping people around the world with ethical AI adoption and implementation. Now, one way she helps them is by speaking in public about her favorite topic, which is the ethical and effective use of artificial intelligence. And that is what we're going to focus on today. How to advocate for a cause that you believe in by speaking in public. Over the past year, Rebecca has spoken about AI at 88 different events. Her audiences have been wide and deep, from communications and PR professionals to teachers, schools, and district leaders to corporate executives. So when it comes to advocacy through public speaking, Rebecca knows it because she does it. I met Rebecca in 2024 when she spoke at the International Association of Business Communicators World Conference in Chicago. Her topic then was AI's transformative role in business communication and future trends. And indeed, AI continues to be transformative and worth speaking about. So welcome, Rebecca. Thanks for being here.
It is so great to see you again. I love that we're doing this. I'm so happy to be here.
Oh, that's terrific. Okay. Before we dive into today's topic, which is going to be very rich for folks, is there anything else about your background you want to share right up front before we dig in?
I think it's important for people to know that I'm not like a tech expert. Like I don't code. I didn't come up in the technology sector. I have a humanities background, a communications background. And one of the reasons I got into doing this is because I noticed there was a gap for people like me who didn't understand how the technology worked. And I just wanted someone to explain it to me in a way that made sense. And so now I try to do that for other people, but it's not because I'm a tech expert. And I don't think you need to be a tech expert to have conversations about AI.
So you kind of did this to meet your own need, is what you're saying.
Yeah, I couldn't find anyone to explain to me what this was or how it worked in a way that wasn't laden with tech jargon or talked about, the ins and outs of the back end of transformer models. And when I couldn't find it, I just decided I would do it so I could help other people figure it out.
Oh, that's terrific. I love that. So you found a gap, you filled it, you're helping others. So kind of a service mindset, which is also kind of cool. And we could do a whole thing on that. But I do want to get back to this topic because I know you have a lot to share, especially if there are folks in the audience who really want to speak about something and they maybe haven't done so yet. So I really hope they can get some inspiration from you. So let's dig in here. Um, in the public speaking that you do, Rebecca, you do advocate constantly for the ethical and effective use of AI. So I'd like to break this down because sometimes people throw around a lot of words and they don't take a minute to really define what it is. So in your words, what does it mean to use AI ethically? Let's start with that one.
So, in general, ethics has many different definitions. It's a gray, blurry area because ethical standards differ across cultures or institutions. You would consider to be moral or ethical, I may feel differently about. So it's not necessarily a hard and fast rule. But as I've thought about this and as I've been living it, for me, ethical use of AI involves taking some ownership to understand the technology and its capabilities and its limitations. So making that your responsibility that you need to spend some time understanding it so you know how it works. Because when you understand it, you can then come from an ethical place and understand and use and critique and interact effectively with AI systems and spot the gaps. So I think that understanding piece is huge, and that's what I try to help people do. And then you can develop critical thinking skills regarding AI and what it's giving you, what you should use it for, what you should not use it for. As you use AI ethically, you realize that you shouldn't just blindly accept the information the AI model provides. You're thinking about your use of AI and how you use what it gives you in a way that will benefit you, but really kind of not harm you or anybody else. as well. So it's nuanced, it's complicated, but it's really going in with your eyes wide open and thinking through, am I using this in a way that is helpful or harmful? And what are the secondary kind of implications of my use in this way? Will it help relationships, harm relationships in the big picture? There's a lot of different moving parts of it, but I think also ethical use of AI has to do with protecting your data and the data of others. But all of that, you have to have a basic understanding of what it is and how it works in order to know how to use it ethically.
You are the first person I've heard to explain it like that, because so many people are saying, here's 20 tools, start using them. And you're saying there's a step you have to do first.
Absolutely. I think that is the core to all of this, is this idea of, AI literacy gets thrown around a lot as a term. More like AI fluency, how to incorporate this into your life, but in a mindful, strategic way, instead of just using it without knowing how it might impact down the line, maybe how you think or how you grow or perpetuate stereotypes. You just have to go in with a foundational understanding of what it is. Otherwise, you can't use it ethically because you don't know what you don't know.
Wow. So to me, that's all about responsibility. So before you play with the tools, and there's a lot of people advocating, get in and play with it. You're saying, no, you need to be responsible first, and you've got to get that education done, and then maybe go in and do some playing because you're a little smarter before you start playing around with tools.
Sure. And I don't think it needs to be like you have to go take a full course. There's just a really, I'd say, a handful of key things that everyone needs to understand about AI to use it responsibly. For example, knowing that sometimes the outputs are completely made up. The links it gives you, the information it gives you, these generative AI tools might be absolutely wrong. If you don't know that, then you may be unknowingly contributing to a giant mis and disinformation problem that already exists. If you're using image generators and you fail to recognize that every image you generate is of a very specific stereotype of a person, and then you're putting those outputs out, you are perpetuating an existing problem. If you use them in what I call a first order thinking way, just to replace things that you're already doing instead of to enhance your own thinking, then you're doing yourself a disservice. And that may have impacts down the road of how you think and over reliance and some of these issues we're seeing. But if you know that those are risks going in, you can be more mindful about your use. And to me, that's being informed allows you then to act ethically as you use them.
I love this contrast you made between replace versus, what was the word you enhance? Yes,
Mm-hmm.
that was great. So that's a almost like a little rule that folks should know. So that's great. So in terms of, you kind of talked about why ethical use matters. So what are the consequences if we do things to replace our thinking versus enhance, and we don't take that first step from a responsibility standpoint? What are the consequences? I mean, what's the ripple effect down the road if you don't take that important first step that you just explained?
Well, we touched on a few of them, and really, it's impossible to see very far into the AI future right now. Obviously, there's a lot of speculation, and there's so many different directions this could go. But again, we might even further contribute to a major mis and disinformation problem and put information out there that was AI generated. If you work for a company and you're putting out bad information, you're going to damage the reputation and the relationships connected to your company. If you're not being transparent about your AI use in a way that your stakeholders expect, there will be moral outrage. We've seen that happen with many companies who have used AI to generate statements that should have been generated by humans. There's a lot of research behind how people feel about AI generated content. They like it better, but when they find out it wasn't written by a human, it kind of can lead to this moral outrage we're seeing, which then causes issues in public relations and company reputations. And the bottom line, Sports Illustrated learned this firsthand when they were using AI generated content and people were upset and it damaged the brand. So really, like, being aware of your use and not only what the expectations are from an ethical perspective, but also what the expectations are from stakeholders. Again, I don't want to see us lose cognitive ability because we are outsourcing things that should be human to an AI, or have students lose that. I don't want to see relationships suffer because we are relying on a chatbot that is wonderfully friendly and emotionally intelligent to the point where we prefer it to flawed human relationships. So there's all of these different moving parts. I don't want to see systemic inequalities perpetuated and deepened through AI. And I think there's a lot of things that could go really wrong. We start to trust it too much blindly. And kind of that dark side is a lot of what I dive into, but I'm also trying to kind of change the trajectory of that a little bit as well.
Well, I think the biggest thing you said was that it could damage relationships. And obviously, the disinformation, misinformation is a big worry for sure. But I don't think I've ever thought about as damaging relationships. Can you give an example of how it could damage relationships if you don't use it ethically or responsibly?
Sure, there's a few different ways. From an organizational perspective, there was a school district in Canada that, in their efforts, which are noble efforts to be transparent about their AI use, put out a social media post explaining about a new curriculum initiative they were undertaking to help repair relationships with Indigenous communities in their area. And it is a very important issue to the community. And they wrote a lovely Facebook post about it. But at the bottom, they said this post was written with AI. And it sent a mixed message. There was huge blowback. People were upset. And in general, I think one of the trends in Canada, we have this research company that identifies trends and how likely they are and how much they will impact the future. And one of the trends is that people will not be able to trust anything they see, hear, read. And we're at that place where people trust, we know from reading the Edelman Trust Barometer, that trust is huge. And we are all skeptical because we don't know what to believe. We don't know if what we're seeing is real or AI generated. And so people are skeptical and they need to know that they can trust organizations and people more than ever because everything is so uncertain. And then from a relationship standpoint, like I mentioned, sure, there's a lot of positive potential use cases. If every lonely person in the world has access to a friendly AI companion, that might be a positive thing down the road, or everyone can get mental health support they need from an expert. There's a lot of ethical conversations around that as well. But you have to wonder, there was a report that came out in the New York Times about Claude, which is a chatbot kind of like ChatGPT that is very, very friendly. And they've specifically trained it to be socially and emotionally very, very intelligent. It has a good vibe. You can't quite put your finger on it, but it has a great personality. And the worry is that, if I need advice or if I need a hype, instead of calling my sister, instead of calling my best friend, I might just instead turn to my chatbot. Or I know that, my one friend is kind of flaky, and because my chatbot never lets me down ever, is always there, is always patient, is always, maybe there's a risk that that becomes kind of my go-to instead, and that could risk human relationships in education even. There's something magical about that student-teacher relationship. If you think back on the best teacher you've ever had or a teacher who changed your life, it was because of that relationship piece, not because you had a personalized learning experience. So there's a real risk that if we're over relying on AI for a lot of things, that we will lose some of those really important elements of humanity.
I just had a flash of, if you did have an issue and you didn't talk to your sister and you relied on the chatbot, what happens to the relationship with your sister? I mean, if you don't spend time with people, it's going to go away. And I also want to thank you for making me remember my high school English teacher. So yeah, it really was based on a relationship. And yeah, you're for sure spot on with that. So wow, that's amazing. Let's move into the effectiveness. And I want to have you define, you did a great job painting that beautiful picture of ethics and what is ethical. Let's do the same thing with effectiveness. And you also advocate for this when you speak. So what does it mean to use it effectively? And I'm sure you're going to contrast that with the ethical side. How do you use it effectively? What does that mean?
Again, I think there's a lot of alignment here because I think to use it effectively, you need to have a basic understanding. And again, that's what I try and give people, but it needs to be practical, right? I like to go into groups and organizations, I study their sector, and I go in and say, here's what I've identified as the top 10 pain points for you. And now I'm going to show you how to address these with an AI tool to make this easier for you. So for me, effective use of AI is learning how to maximize its benefits to get it to do the intended thing and give you the intended outcomes. And sometimes that requires interacting with it in a very specific way. It's not hard. Someone just needs to tell you. So, things that used to take you forever, you can now do much more effectively and redirect that extra time, maybe into human relationships, maybe into parts of your job you love, but you need to be able to know how to use those tools to the best of their capabilities and what tools might work best for your specific situation.
So I love what you said in the beginning about, so this is almost vertical specific. So different industries, you say you do that research to figure out, and I'm just going to pick on education because I know you're, very big into the education sector. You will do that research to say, I know the education sector and this is how it can be used for you. So it's super specific from a vertical perspective.
Yeah, so I actually use an AI tool to assist me with that. I will go online, and I learned this from a guy I follow on LinkedIn. His name's Christopher Penn. I have AI retrieve for me like the 50 most recent top podcast episodes that had to do with the sector and get the transcripts, and then put large amounts of information into an AI tool and have it identify the most talked about topics and issues. And it will generate a list for me. And then I reach out to the organizer and someone in the sector and do that human fact checking and say, are these what you would identify? What would you add to this list? And then I look at specific tools and use cases that would help solve those problems or make those things easier.
How long does that take you, that process you just described?
Not as long as you'd think.
It would have taken a lot if you had to do it by, the old manual methods, but just to
Yeah.
put all that stuff in there. And then you've got some answers and it's fact check with a human is what you're saying.
That's the secret to ethical AI, a huge part of it. I think that human in the loop, we call it, that human element is critical all the time. And I try to model that in everything I do.
Oh, that's a great little recipe for success. So I appreciate that. And again, if you don't go through this effectiveness, I love what you said about this human loop. What are the consequences if you don't follow this process for using it effectively for your vertical, your industry? What's the consequences?
Well, I think first and foremost, a consequence is that you think AI is not useful. I'll talk to people all the time who say, I tried it, ChatGPT, I tried using AI and it sucked. It wasn't even very good. And I have to tell them if AI wasn't good for you, maybe you're the problem, right? Like maybe we need to improve how you're interacting with it because this truly is a model that this generative AI that you get out of it, what you put into it, and garbage in, garbage out, and how you interact with it really, really matters. So the risk number one is that you'll just not get anything useful and you'll be fooled into thinking AI can't help you, which is absolutely not true. There is at least one way, there's many ways that AI can help every single person. I think too, if we are not using it to the best of its ability or effectively, we can get lazy, right? There's specific ways that you can use AI to fact check itself or to give you checks on, have it check each other or be a second set of eyes for you. And so we just want to know how to use those things so that we can not get too lazy and not know how to find those gaps. Also, there's a risk that it's just wasted resources, right? If your company buys it for your whole company and you're not using it effectively, it's a waste of money. If you buy a ChatGPT subscription for $20 a month and you're not using it effectively, you're wasting your money, you're getting a poor return on your investment. Really, like if you're not using it effectively, then you're the one losing out because there are so many ways to use it effectively, and you'll ultimately be at a competitive disadvantage, personally, professionally, because there are people who are leveraging it very, very effectively. And you want to be in that camp so that you can move along with everybody else and keep up with all the things that you need to do.
So, I heard you say the biggest risk is abandoning the tool itself out of frustration, but you said something else that's really fascinating. You said fact check itself. What do you mean by that? Because I've not heard that before.
Well, and there's a lot of different ways to do this. You obviously still need the human ultimately to make the judgment, but sometimes I will say, can you please check this again and make sure everything is absolutely true? And sometimes it's like, oh, you're right, this one part I made up. Or can you please go online, ChatGPT, and find me all of the sources that actually validate this information? Or I'll take something and then put it in Claude and say, do you think this sounds right? So just kind of using it across platforms. Again, it's not going to be able to be guaranteed to be 100% right every time, but you can use it for that gap checking as well. For example, I'll write something for a specific stakeholder group, and then I'll give it to ChatGPT and say, I want you to act as a board of directors or this very specific customer profile that I built, and identify any gaps. Tell me how it makes you feel. What 10 questions would you have about this? So by using it effectively, it's checking my work, it's taking on a different perspective, it's helping me find the gaps and see things that I might have missed so that then I can ultimately deliver more effective message. And so you can use it to fact check itself or find your own gaps, but always having that human in the loop. Again, I'm not going to fully trust it until I've laid eyes on it. And something we talk about in the industry is this 4 eyeball rule. If you're doing something for a company with AI, it doesn't go out to a consumer until it's been through 4 human eyeballs. And so I think that's an important rule. But yes, you can use AI to assist with that 100%.
So what's becoming clear to me is that this responsibility piece that you mentioned that, kind of goes with the ethical discussion we had, there's a responsibility piece also with the effectiveness of this. And you gave a lot of examples. You almost layered examples. This is just not a one and done. You have to layer different things from a responsibility standpoint to ensure you're being effective with it. Is that a good summation of that?
Absolutely. And it goes back to what we talked about at the very beginning, which is have a basic understanding of what these tools are and are not, how they work, what they're capable of, but where the limits are. Because I know that, now I can go in and effectively use the tool while also knowing it might have things that are wrong, or also knowing there's a risk if I over rely or trust on it. And then that layers into my work, but having that foundation and knowing those limitations are crucial.
Now, that's great. You have just laid out a beautiful blueprint. And I got to tell you, some of the things you shared, I'm going to tweak some of my processes just from some of these tips. So I appreciate that. Let's go off and talk about the folks that you talk to when you talk about AI so richly. One of your target groups has been professional communicators, which, of course, I experienced that myself last summer. But you talk to professional communicators, public relations folks, people in business communications, and then also practitioners in school communications. So from the communications perspective, since you speak to these folks so often, what has changed for them? I mean, if you're advocating for this ethical and effective use, do you know how things have changed for this particular stakeholder group of professional communicators? What's different as a result of what you've been advocating for on their behalf?
It's hard to know for sure, I think, but I try and collect feedback, as good communications practitioners do about what resonated, what they will do differently moving forward. And I think that a lot of people didn't necessarily recognize some of the risks. And so they're adjusting their practices to involve more of those ethical checks and balances, like fact checking and asking questions about the output, thinking critically. I think the biggest thing is people go from thinking this version of AI is just a tool that just writes stuff for you, when really that's the least interesting way to use it. I like to show people how to use it as a strategic ally to push them into that second level of AI thinking. I use this analogy and it's not great, but it's the best way I can think of it. I call it an AI Oreo, but it's more like an Oreo ice cream sandwich or, with a big fat ice cream middle or those super mega ultra stuffed Oreos that have the big white in the middle. But I get the sense that this changes how people think about using AI. So your top cookie is 20% AI use. You use AI to get you started, and you use AI to generate ideas. Give me 100 ideas. Give me different thoughts for how I can approach this project. Give me ideas about how I can structure this. Give me campaign ideas. And then you move to a completely different space, Word, Google, you get out of the AI and you spend 60%, that middle white stuff, the best part, using your expertise, your wisdom, your knowledge, all of that to build whatever you're doing. And then at the end, that last 20%, the bottom cookie, you go back to AI and say, hey, analyze this as if you were my board of trustees. What am I missing? or you give it a ton of contextual data like your company mission, vision, values, strategic plan, anything that's publicly available in these tools anyway, ChatGPT, and have it evaluate how well it aligns with those things or find the gap or offer suggestions for how it could be improved based on this information. So using AI at the start and the end, but keeping the middle human, I like to think it brings a lot of clarity for communicators on how they can use this. I think a lot of people come in thinking they're going to be replaced and AI can do all the things they're doing. And I like to show them ways that it can actually enhance what they're doing and help them think more strategically. And I like to make sure they feel empowered because the reason that I've been successful at using AI is because of my communications background. I realized early on in my first interaction with ChatGPT, the day after it came out, that you fully control this technology with human language, with words. And as professional communicators, that's our trade. We are excellent communicators. We're good at making concepts clear and describing things to people in ways that make sense. And that's a skill you can leverage to maximize your use of AI. So I like to empower people by telling them that, helping them figure out how to use it and go forward with a plan, and then also change how they think about using it ethically.
That Oreo is a total blueprint for communicators because you've just said, here's how you can use this day to day. And it's just, rinse and repeat that process. So I don't think I'll ever look at Oreos the same way again. So that was a great example of how you've affected them and just teaching that. And I'm assuming that they're applying this because I'm assuming you get some feedback from folks even after you speak that they appreciate what you've done. And my hunch is you even got that from the IEBC folks. And I've seen the reviews. You did an awesome job last year. So that's wonderful and a great story about the Oreo. Let's move on to your other audience that you speak a lot to, which is that education sector. So administrators, teachers, policymakers, specifically in K through 12 education. Is that right? That's that group that you speak to?
Yeah, yeah.
So let's talk about how you've made a difference for these folks. And I know you speak all over because I looked at your speaking agendas. So where have you made a difference? And maybe you can give us some examples of how you're speaking and teaching and advocating for this ethical and effective use, how it's made a difference for someone or some group in the education sector.
I think my background in communications in K to 12 gave me some unique insights early on into how educators were feeling about this. And it was just a ton of fear and anxiety around this technology and what it was going to do to the future of learning, especially around academic integrity, right? Kids are going to use this to cheat. They started right away. AI can write essays. Really, the pinnacle of everything we do in education is show me what you learned by writing an essay. And as soon as that changes, everybody's freaking out. Like, what if kids never learn now? How can we check if they're cheating? What if, how is this going to change everything? What if nobody comes to school anymore because everyone has an AI teacher? A lot of fear and a lot of misunderstanding about what AI is and how it works, which is fair. Everybody has that because nobody knows. All of these tools came out with no instruction manuals, no warning. Everyone just has to make it up and everybody's doing the best they can. But I think some of that basic understanding is important. That basic AI literacy, especially for leaders and teachers, is important. I like to start by showing teachers then specific ways they can use it to help them in the back end of what they do, because educators are busy and exhausted and they have a lot going on. And if there's some ways that we can use AI to help make that easier or help you think differently and come up with new ways to do things, like, let's do it. Let's get the teachers comfortable. But then also, I think one of the things that surprises people the most is that I'm really, really against AI detectors. And I think, when ChatGPT first came out, this was touted as a solve-all problem. We can detect AI-generated writing, and a lot of kids were punished, and they're still used all the time, but they're not reliable. And helping to start having educators start thinking differently about, well, maybe essays are not the be-all end-all anymore. Maybe we need to think differently about how we're grading students. Maybe we shouldn't just be blocking this. Maybe we should be helping prepare kids for the future with this. And so I hope that I'm doing things in a way that empowers people to use it and maybe start thinking differently and creatively, and also question, oh, I can't just put this kid's essay in an AI detector and then give them a 0, or give it to ChatGPT and say, did you write this, ChatGPT? And ChatGPT lies about that constantly. It has no way to know whether it wrote it or not. So I think it's just that understanding. And then I'm also doing a lot of work on governance and policy frameworks and adoption frameworks to help support leaders in making good decisions about what AI should look like at their school.
So I'm hearing you say you took, and let's just say teachers as a beginning part, from a position of fear to almost a position of empowerment. So from an impact perspective, by getting out there and doing this advocacy, they started out very afraid. And you're saying you've moved that thinking to, here's how we're going to help you take a lot of work off your plate. So that's a relief standpoint, right? And then here's how we're going to help you help your students use it wisely. So if you look at this fear spectrum, I'll just call it, I mean, how far have you advanced? I'm sure there's still more work to be done, but if they were, at a, 10 for fear, like very frightened, where do you think they are now in terms of some of the work and some of the teaching and some of the advocacy that you've done with AI? Where do you think that you've moved them on this spectrum?
I feel like I ask a specific question at the beginning of my sessions, and then I ask it again at the end. And it's a word cloud about describe in one word how you're feeling. And so I like to see those words change and the breakdown of those words change. And usually you don't see those words like fear and anxious at the end of the session. And so really, what my biggest takeaway from that is really all you need to do is just spend a little bit of time understanding some of these basics. And if we can just give that to everybody, then we can all start moving forward and making actual plans and strategies for the future. But I really think knowledge is power in this case. And the more you know, the more empowered people feel, then they can move into the future with confidence because they know their job the best. And as soon as they understand the tool and blend those two together, they will do amazing things that I would never think of because I don't look at things with the same brain and nuance and wisdom that they have. So really, it's just getting people started and then empowering them to create.
So your job is to get them started, get them out of the gate, and you're saying they can do great things once they get that little push out of the gate.
Yes, I think anybody can.
Do you have an example there from the education sector where you saw a pretty cool transformation? Is there a specific example that you might want to share on that? I'd love to hear that if you've got a good one.
Sure, sure. So part of what I'm doing kind of over a long-term for a school year is working with a large high school in Los Angeles. And a girl I work with down there and I have gone and delivered beginning of the year professional development sessions. And then we've offered private, personalized one-on-one AI coaching sessions with teachers. And they started out very, very basic. But most recently, I was meeting with, it's a Catholic school. Somebody who teaches religion. And she had an incredible idea because AI is great at making connections and making things engaging. And one of my favorite AI tools is one called Notebook LM. So I showed her this tool and she said, I'm teaching the book of Exodus right now, and my high school kids are not into this. It's hard to get them engaged. I wonder if I could take something they are interested in and put it with the book of Exodus and have AI generate a really realistic sounding podcast that they can then listen to that will make it all really, really relevant for them. And so she knew that they liked this Netflix show, Outer Banks. She gave an Outer Banks trailer in the book of Exodus to Notebook LM and generated a podcast that was just really engaging for kids to listen to. She said it went really well. And I never would have thought of that as a delivery system to help get kids engaged or known that about her students, but it ended up being a great use case. And I use that story and I think about it all the time. And I use it with my own kids. I have 4 kids in college, and one of my kids was really struggling with a business mathematics, like accounting course. And he plays college basketball. And so we just used Notebook LM again to give it the slide deck from the professor and give it, an NBA website and explained the whole thing to him in NBA and basketball concepts. And then he understood. And so it's just kind of giving people the tools they need and then sharing what you learn. Like that's how this is all going to work. That's one of my personal principles, is to share knowledge and information generously and proactively. And I think if we all do that and share what works and what doesn't work in our journeys, then that will inspire people to create new things, and we'll all get better ideas that way.
So two things occurred to me when you were sharing that. Is that, I'm going to make sure I know the name of this tool, Notebook LM? Is that what it was?
Yeah. Yeah, it's from Google. It's probably my favorite AI tool right now.
Okay. So the other thing that resonated with me was when you said you took something that was familiar to somebody, a Netflix show or basketball, and introduced them to a new concept. And by bringing something they were familiar with something new, they were engaged, they got it, they learned, they connected the dots. Is that right?
Yeah, and that doesn't apply to students. Anyone who wants to learn anything can do that. Notebook LM, you can give it 50 different articles that you want to read or tons of customer service data, have it generate a podcast, and it synthesizes all of that into a conversational delivery way that sounds exactly like two real podcast hosts. And you can just, instead of having to read everything, you can consume information, large amounts of information differently in a way that makes sense to you.
And that you enjoy it, right? If you're into
Mm-hmm.
basketball, if you're into this Netflix show, it's
Mm-hmm.
more enjoyable. It's more fun. It's, that's a win. That's a win.
Right,
I love that
exactly.
example. I've got an idea of maybe how I can use that. So thank you for sharing that. So I'm wondering, that you've spoken about this. You continue to hit the road. I mentioned early on 88 talks over the past year. So I'm wondering why you're so driven to talk about this topic. I was wondering if there was an aha moment or experience. I mean, you shared at the beginning, you were struggling to find it yourself, and so you decided to fill that gap yourself. But was there an experience or an aha moment that you remember that you can share, like, I'm going to do this, like you made a decision to get on the road and start speaking about this?
I remember the minute I became kind of fascinated with AI, and I watched a documentary that was recommended to me. It's called AlphaGo, and it's free on YouTube. It's an award-winning documentary. And the long story short about it is it's from about 2016 when they very first built an AI model that could win at the game of Go, which is the oldest game in the world. And they'd already had AI that could beat chess and checkers, but the game of Go was a new challenge because there's more possible moves in the game of Go than atoms in the universe. And they decided they were going to play this AlphaGo against the world champion of Go in Korea. And it was a 5 game series. And in game two, AlphaGo made a move that had never been played in the history of the game of Go, ever. And it blew people away. It rattled a competitor. He lost. And it was kind of a bummer for humanity, right? Like suddenly we're not the best at this thing. But in game four, uh, Lee Sedol, the world champion, had already lost most of the games. He made a move that he had never made before, that he had never thought of before. And he won the game because AlphaGo was not expecting it, and it sent AlphaGo into a tailspin. But when I was reading more about it after from Cade Metz, who's a New York Times journalist, he said that without move 78, there never would have been this move 37. And together, it pushed humans to think better, be more creative, to places we never would have gone otherwise. And I was so inspired by that, about the potential for AI. But at the same time, I remember the moment that I was working with AI early on and realizing and thinking, I don't know who's deciding what this tells me. I wonder if we would have had this during COVID and I would have asked it something about vaccines, what it would have told me, and who would decide the agenda for what it told me. Are they taking money on the back end to tell me a specific thing or not tell me a specific thing? And it made me realize how little we knew about what was going into these models, who was controlling them. And I started to have a lot of concerns that there's nobody watching what was going on. And the more I learned, the more I realized nobody's watching because nobody understands. And that's when I decided to really dig in and um, start really digging into the ethical end of things and actually doing formal research around it.
Isn't that interesting? We talk a lot about storytelling and we could do another thing on that, but the fact that you got engaged in that story of what was happening
Mm-hmm.
when you were watching that and that propelled you to take an action. I think that's super cool that you remember that moved you in that way. So, like I said, we could do a whole thing on storytelling, but yeah, that's a great story. So thank you for sharing that. One of the things that you and I have talked about this, when I work with speakers who are advocating for a cause, if they're trying to change the way their audiences think or behave, I always encourage them to come up with a big idea because a lot of times they have a million ideas and they have trouble boiling it down. But a big idea in a single sentence to help them stay focused, on a single message when they're advocating for something and trying to get an audience to adopt their big idea. So I'm wondering, do you have a big idea that you try to nail when you do some of your presentations on ethical and effective use of AI? And something that frames your work, is there a big idea that you want your audiences to remember, take away, use, change the way they do things?
Yeah, I think I have a couple. I think that first big idea that I really want people to walk away from is this idea that, again, that move 37, move 78, together with AI, we can be so much more if we do it well and responsibly. It can take us to places we've never been. It can help us think deeper than we've ever thought. It can help us be better. And if we use it in a way that is ethical and helps empower us in what we do. So my first big idea is that people can do it, and it's helpful. It can make us better. But from an ethical standpoint, the other big idea that I kind of carry, it is actually, it's based on another story. It's based on a Dr. Seuss book. And I just have not, I've thought about this from day one. But Dr. Seuss has this book called Horton Hears a Who. And in the book, Horton the elephant finds a flower and he realizes there's a whole city of people living on the flower, the Whos. And nobody can see them and nobody can hear them. And so they're about to be thrown into the fire, discarded. And Horton encourages them all to run around and find everybody and get everybody to speak up at once so they can be heard. And they still can't be heard. So the mayor runs around the town looking for everybody. And way up in the top of one of the buildings, he finds one little Who named JoJo who's just playing with a yo-yo and not contributing. And as soon as he gets this one last person to open their voice and add an extra yop, is all he says, they could finally be heard. And I feel like my big idea is the more people that I empower with knowledge about AI, collectively, we can raise our voices and demand better from AI companies, demand more accountability, demand widespread training for everybody and fairness and all of these ethical principles. But we can do more together to affect change than maybe I can do by myself. So I guess my second big idea is just that one extra yop to put us there.
That's great. And so, of course, you've tapped into my favorite author of all time, Dr. Seuss. So, who doesn't love that language? But the first thing that you mentioned was this idea of potential. You're trying to get, your first big idea is you want people to see that amazing potential with AI married with the humans that maybe they've never thought before. So who doesn't want to reach a potential you haven't reached before? And then I think in terms of advocacy, in terms of the more people that you can rope into knowing about this and learning about it, the more we can have an impact up the chain as this technology continues to be developed. Those are two excellent big ideas. And like I say, as a side note, I love that you married it with Dr. Seuss and Horton Hears a Who. So gold star for you. That's awesome. I want to go back to some research that you are doing on ethics, which I think is fascinating. So you're really delving into research. Can you talk a little bit about this? Because this is part of your master's program at the University of Edinburgh, and I want to kind of hear what you're learning or what this is all about. Why are you diving so deeply into that and getting a master's degree in this?
About a year ago, I knew that I wanted to dive into this and nothing existed, like especially not in North America. And all I could find that wasn't like a data science, like coding end of things, was this program in Edinburgh. And the UK is famous for their perspectives on like privacy and security. So the master's that I'm in is data and artificial intelligence ethics. And there are some really incredible people doing work there. But because I know that I wanted to work, helping support education and all different types of people, I also recognize the game requires me to have demonstrated knowledge. I can't just say I like AI. I actually really wanted to have formal training in what that looks like because I wanted to be able to inform change at the highest levels. And I know that I needed to have a certain amount of credibility and understanding. So I wanted to deepen my knowledge and expertise. That was important to me. I wanted to learn from the best possible people. And I didn't want to go to just a university that was slapping this on as like a moneymaker, maybe, because AI was the buzzword. I wanted to kind of dig in with people who had been doing it for a long time. And the people I'm learning from are the best in the world. And so I knew that it would help me stay ahead of the curve. I knew it would be a sacrifice. The classes are 2 in the morning, sometimes 2 in the morning till 10 in the morning. But I felt strongly that it was important and that I could affect more people, especially in education. They really want to know that you have credentials and letters and expertise. And I knew that to actually affect change, I needed to be able to demonstrate that I knew what I was talking about. And I wanted to add some nuance and complexity and have that credibility and authority. And I'm just super interested in it. I wanted to have a richer, deeper, more nuanced understanding of what I was talking about and learning about, and be able to give real life examples of when things go wrong and when things go right.
I love the fact that you said you're learning from the best of the best, the masters in this industry, which, that's exciting to all of us. And my hunch is that you're going to take some of this and you're going to take your speaking to yet the next level in terms of having this specialized knowledge, information, credibility, credential. So that's great. And 2026 is when you'll be finished. Is that right?
Should be. Yeah, I'm about halfway through. So cross your fingers.
Keep going, keep going. All right. I also want to just kind of give you an example. I got an email last week from a subject matter expert, not in AI, but she really has this, passion. She wants to do more public speaking herself for folks that are in enterprise IT and how to make it more people centric. So there's that, relationship people piece that you also talk about. But she's just beginning her journey. She's a little scared. So if she's saying, I've got this passion to bring the people side when you're doing change management and enterprise IT, but I've never done public speaking, what advice would you give to her? Somebody that wants to go on the road like you are and advocate for a cause. What would you tell this person?
Oh, there's so many different elements to it, but if it's something you're passionate about, like learn in public, go onto LinkedIn and post all the things you're learning as you learn them, your wins, your failures, be human, be authentic, connect with people who are already doing what you want to do and find out what they did and watch what they're doing, figure out what they're saying, post your big ideas, engage people in conversations so that your name is everywhere connected to that topic. I just wanted eventually, like people when they were like, oh, AI, oh yeah, Rebecca, like I wanted them to be able to link those things. So if you talk about those things all the time in public and be human and let people see you, and then proactively engage with other people who are interested in the same things as you, find them on LinkedIn, follow them, comment on their posts, learn from other people, and go in approachable and honest. Like, don't even try to be an expert, just try to be a learner and be more human than necessary. But be very public about what you're learning and what you're doing in a way that's very useful for people. And they'll follow you because what you're saying is useful and they like you. So be authentic too. That authenticity piece is huge. Yeah. And find people in the space who are doing what you want to do and talk to them and learn from them and hitch onto their wagon if you can. Ask them, all your questions and they'll be happy to help you. I always am, because there's just not enough people doing human-centric things in the space. So there's definitely a market. You just have to really put yourself out there, I think.
So that's interesting. So you're saying first thing you need to do is get out there and make sure your subject matter expertise is out in the world through a social platform like LinkedIn. And then a second step would be use like hitch onto other people's wagons in your space. But from the speaking standpoint, once she's getting that credibility, then you're saying she's got the ability to get those speaking engagements so she can advocate. Is there a third step in there that you would advise her to do to get those engagements? Because you got 88 last year. So if she's
Yeah.
establishing herself as a subject matter expert on LinkedIn, let's just say for 6 months, she works really hard at this. What should she do then to get those speaking gigs like what you've been able to do?
Offer to speak for free. Like just find even the smallest of small conferences that are strapped for budgets. This is what I did. I just offered to speak at a really local chapter of something about AI when AI was super new. And I did it for free because I liked it. So just find anybody who's having even a small conference or a webinar and offer to share your expertise for free. And then post about it. And then people will be like, oh, she's a speaker. We should get her to come speak with this. And just all those things you do, post about it and offer to speak at all of those things for free. Find local things, go in and talk to local organizations for free, be proactive, reach out, start small and just build your experience and show that you're doing it. And really just spend some time proactively hunting through for those opportunities, or use AI to say, hey, I'm interested in this. Give me a list of 100 adjacent or similar sectors or regions that might be having conferences. What should I look at besides this one type of conference? Maybe it's human resources. Maybe it's something like adjacent that you can translate your expertise into, and then find them all and spend time just reaching out to as many people as you can and offer to share your expertise. Don't limit yourself to one thing or one audience or one organization. Spread it out. Use AI to give you ideas too. You can say, hey, ChatGPT, you are the top expert in the world at helping people get started in public speaking careers. Here's my entire situation. Act as an expert and tell me what my next step should be. And ChatGPT will probably have even way better suggestions than I do that might spark new creative ideas in that space as well.
You may not realize that you just did another cookie analogy, right? So, get on social and, promote your subject matter expertise, right? Get out there and find those smaller conferences, and then, use AI to do that, or post about it afterward, was your third piece, and then use AI to, get even more gigs. So it's kind of like a, double decker.
Oh, yeah.
So
Oh, yeah.
that's
I'm a
good.
big cookie lover.
There you go. So it all comes down to cookies. That's great. I wanted to talk with you just a minute about your podcast. So this is a
Oh, yeah.
rather new venture. You started a podcast in December. Can you tell us about it and how that connects with your platform for speaking and advocating about effective and ethical AI use? How does your podcast connect to that? Tell us about that.
I was giving a keynote in Ohio last year, and I connected with this guy named Brett, and we were so aligned on our vision and our skill sets were very complementary that we ended up working together more, and we just decided to share publicly our podcast. He's very well connected, and we just felt like there was a lot of things that maybe educators specifically would want to know about, or we wanted to help amplify the voices of people who are doing really good things in the space. And we just decided to give it a shot, and it just gives us a chance to, in all of them, I'll give like a little AI tip of the week. We usually have a guest on who's doing amazing things in the space, and then we kind of do some news updates throughout the week. So it's just kind of been a fun way to help us learn a little bit more, amplify important voices. And, I offer ethical perspectives on things. Brett is a former principal from the Bronx, and so he has an educator's perspective. And it's just kind of a fun new venture that for no other reason than we just really enjoy it. And, it's not anything that we're hoping will like make us millionaires or anything like that. It's just something that we enjoy and helps us to deepen our thinking about a lot of topics and hopefully maybe bring them to different audiences and empower people in a different way or meet them where they're at.
Yeah, so that almost is icing on the cake of some of the speaking that you're doing. So you're speaking to all these different groups in that educational sector, but you're also adding more, sprinkles, icing, everything with some of the ways you're doing that with the podcast for that particular vertical in the education sector. So that's kind of, we just keep talking about sweets, cookies.
I know, I
So I don't
know.
know. But that's very cool, and yeah, congratulations on that. That's quite an accomplishment. And I got to tell you, I love the fact that you've got an educator. You said he was a school principal, and then of
Mm-hmm.
course you've got educational experience, but your whole communications background. I just think that's a really cool combination to make an impact, in that industry. So very very neat. You've got a lot of stuff coming up in 2025. Can you give us a little preview of what other kinds of advocacy you're going to be doing throughout 2025 as it relates to the ethical and effective use of AI? Who are you talking to, and what are you really looking forward to, maybe of all the many things on your plate?
I've got some scheduled events to speak to a lot of communicators that I'm excited about. I'm still doing the work in LA, but I'm helping them write some policies. And actually, my thesis work is around developing governance frameworks for system leaders in K-12 education to help them make ethical decisions around AI implementation and what those policies should look like and things they should be thinking about to help them make ethical AI decisions. So I'm looking forward to doing more research about that. I'm contributing to a university textbook on crisis communications, but my stuff will be on AI, and I'm working with some legends in crisis communication, which is, I'm excited about that. But I think what I'm most excited about is, I was invited back to be a guest lecturer at the university where I did my undergrad to communicators, like in their first year of, getting a communications degree. And I think I'm the most excited about that because I had a really non-traditional career path, and I stayed home to raise my kids. I had a lot of kids by the time I was 22, and they're all in college now. And I did my education later in life. I didn't get my undergrad till I was 40, and I really thought that career ship had sailed for me, and I really wanted to be an expert or respected in a career, but I felt like I was starting too late. And to be able to go back to that university just a few years later as a subject matter expert is it it means a lot to me, and to be able to pay forward to other people who are moving into the communication space, that just means a lot to me. I don't know how to explain it properly, but it just feels like something I thought would never be in the cards for me. And so I'm just grateful for that opportunity in particular.
So you're saying you're going to work with these students and they're going to get out of the gate like super fast because you have the ability to really affect them. Is that kind of what you're saying?
I hope so. I hope so. My goal is that I can, empower people to, instead of thinking, especially in comms, right? Like people think, great, now AI is going to take my job. But if we can take them from thinking, well, my job is to just write press releases and now AI can do it. No, your job is to be a strategic communicator now. And this is how you can do it with AI and be even more valuable. I think one of the my biggest things that bugs me in the communication space is how undervalued professional communicators are in organizations. And if we can elevate them and their strategic value in their organizations and as a profession, that's what I want to do. And if AI can help us do that and we can elevate everybody, a rising tide lifts all ships, I think that would be amazing.
So you just totally connected a dot for me. In the past, and perhaps you'll agree with this, communicators almost were told you've got to pay your dues and just churn out press releases day after day. And then maybe after 20 years, you might get a chance to do some strategic work. And you're saying, no way. With AI, you've got the chance to do that literally right when you get out of school, perhaps even before, because you can get to strategy quicker and perhaps being a strategic advisor and a business advisor quicker with the use of AI. You don't have to pay as many dues and do all
Mhm.
those mundane things that you had to do to work your way up. Is that a good explanation?
Yeah, and you can position yourself sooner as a valuable asset in your organization. If you understand AI, and often as communicators, we are the ethical conscience of our organizations too, and we understand the publics. If we can leverage all of that knowledge and skill set and come in and say, hey, I know how to use AI, I can make this strategic, I can bring in all of our company priorities and come up with a really, really targeted plan that will really affect change. And I also know a lot about how we shouldn't do this, then you're valuable to leadership in the C-suite because you understand the landscape and you have the strategic ability to help the company's bottom line ultimately, which is what they care about in the C-suite, right? So I think positioning people with that combination of skills and helping them know how to use it, uh, it's way beyond just write a press release. It's we rely on you as an important part of this process. And I'd like to see all communicators and public relations experts get to that place because they can, because they already have the skill sets they need to do it.
So that is super exciting. If I were starting out in journalism communications today, the opportunity or the potential, to use one of your words, to go from you're not going to have to be a tactician for 20 years. That's exciting to people where you can really be a valued contributor with the help of AI. So that's a whole very cool thing. And like I said, if I was a 20 something, I would be super excited about getting out of the gate quicker and being able to make that impact because it makes your job and your career so much more worthwhile if you're able to see yourself as making those valuable contributions much earlier and not having to wait and pay your dues. So I love this. I love this. That's great. Any final thoughts, Rebecca? Anything we haven't talked about as it relates to the power of advocating for something you truly believe in by getting on the road, speaking, whether it's a podcast, a webinar, in person. What else can you say that we haven't said that you think would really help folks that are maybe ready to go do this for themselves if they've got a great message?
I think it's a matter of really kind of deep diving into yourself and figuring out what you're passionate about and grasping onto that. I was trying 4 years ago to figure out like, I hit that midlife, my kids are growing up and I'm like, what's my thing? And people would be like, well, what are you interested in? And I'm like, nothing, I don't know, everything. But as soon as you find that thing that you're so interested in, and it could be knitting, it can be like a particular brand that you like, just go all in. Anything that you really nerd out about when you talk about it, that's what people like. I get super into my presentations and I get so excited about it. And I've never once been nervous, never, because I just am so excited to talk about this thing that I love and help other people love it too. And whatever that thing is for you, start talking about it and sharing your passion, because even if people aren't into the topic, they'll be engaged because you're engaged, and then you'll be able to have an impact. So it might not be the thing you think that you should be monetizing and public speaking and having influence in. Passion is the secret. You can tell when people are really passionate about something, and that's what changes hearts and minds, I think. So lean into whatever that thing is that you could talk about all day. And that's kind of where the secret sauce is, I think.
You also gave it another name. You may not have heard yourself. You said you got to nerd out. So if you
Oh,
can nerd
yeah.
out about something, there's your answer. So
Yep.
I love that. That's great. Um, so I want to thank you for your time today. I've totally enjoyed talking with you. I've learned a lot for my own work and for my clients, and I really think other folks who see this are going to learn something too. So I want to thank everybody who took the time to tune in today. We hope you got something out of it. And I would love, and Rebecca would also love, I'm certain, if you would take some time to connect with both of us on LinkedIn. We're happy to answer questions about this topic, about how you can get out there, find your passion, find out what you're going to nerd out about, and go out on the road and talk about that and advocate for what you believe in and change the hearts and minds of other people. Get them to go along with your big idea. That's kind of what we're talking about today. If you do that and you have some success, we would love to hear from you. And, did this make a difference? Have you made a difference with your idea, with your advocating for something that you believe in? So drop us a line. We're both easily accessible on LinkedIn. And until then, I would love to thank all of you. Thank you for being here. And everybody have a wonderful rest of your day.